welcome to this session of Life Goals. Today we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit, joy. When you think about pursuing joy, it seems just a little bit odd, right? I mean, have you ever just thought, you know what, I need to be happier? Or tried to tell someone else to be happier? In our family, we have a rule that everybody has to come to the dinner table and eat together. And so I'll tell the kids, you got to be there, you got to be on time. Some of the older ones don't want to participate, and they'll sit there with their heads down. So I'll make a second rule. You've got to be there. You've got to be on time. You have to participate. And then they will. They'll participate, but it'll be surly and angry and snarly. And so I come up with one more rule. You have to be there. You have to be on time. You have to participate, and you have to be happy. I've even been guilty of taking kids on vacation and then demanding that they be happy about it because, after all, I paid a lot of money for this vacation, right? So how do you pursue happiness? You know, there's been a lot of research on this. We find that often the things that we think will bring happiness don't. A pursuit of a little bit more money or the latest piece of technology or just the right house, we often find it lacking. In fact, studies across the board show that while some happiness may come with a new situation, it often wanes or falls off. Or you find that when suffering hits, that happiness was often very thin. You see, happiness as it is pretty circumstantial. It's hard to get a hold of. It's hard to grasp. So what do you do about that? And how is it that the writers of the New Testament say, you know, that's something that you should have more of? You should grow in joy. Well, there are a couple different ways to look at happiness. In fact, social scientists today are talking about two different types of happiness. One is this pursuit of more. It's a pursuit of a feeling, maybe a euphoria. The other is a pursuit of meaning and contentment. A pursuit of fulfillment. Scripture often uses the word joy for that type of happiness. That we would pursue meaning, that we would pursue contentment, that we would be fulfilled. And it's that type of joy that the New Testament writers are writing about. In Paul's book to the Philippians, he talks a lot about joy. It's almost as if he's saying, I'm going to choose joy. He writes it from a prison, after all. And yet he's telling them, you need to be joyful, you need to grow in joy, and I choose joy. So how does he do this? Well, Paul gives us a clue right at the beginning. In all of his other letters that he writes to other churches, he starts off with his title, I, Paul, an apostle. He gives it some meaning, some gravitas. I, an apostle, listen to me. But in this one, to the church in Philippi, a church that was all about status. In fact, they were in the Roman world and they were in this Roman path looking for what could bring happiness and what could bring fulfillment and what could make them a little bit richer and a little bit better and a little bit happier. And it was in that world where status was everything that Paul, instead of saying, I, Paul, an apostle, starts off, I, Paul, a servant. He gives us a clue that the pursuit of joy might not be what we think it is. In fact, there may be a bit of a paradox to the pursuit of joy, that joy can't be pursued directly. In fact, there are three things I want to give you that you can work on to actually grow in joy. The first, rather than pursuing happiness, is to pursue meaning. As we find meaning in our life, as we figure out what God has called us to do, and as we lean into that, as we understand who God has called us to be, that we are His children, and that He has given us purpose, and we start to pursue this meaning, we find that joy actually grows. Paul's going to talk about this in Philippians in chapter 2. He's going to talk about this pursuit of the call that God has given him. And he connects that with this idea of joy. So when you want more joy, you need to pursue meaning. The second thing you can do is to practice generosity and kindness. You see, rather than practicing getting more stuff or finding more things or earning more titles, this is a practice of pouring yourself out. Philippians chapter 2, again, is a great place for this. Paul starts to describe how you should interact with each other. And to do that, he gives us a model of how Christ interacted with us. And he says Christ didn't pursue gain. In fact, Christ poured himself out. And then Paul says it's in that pouring out that we find glory. And it's in that pouring out that we will find joy. So rather than pursuing more stuff, I want to encourage you, as you think about growing in joy, to pursue generosity, to practice kindness. Now, here's a third thing, and this is based on research, but it dovetails right along with the scripture. The research that's been done says this: if you want to have a happy life, if you want to have this meaningful, joy-filled life, there's one thing that's a key to all of it, and that is relationships. In fact, one of the largest, longest studies that's ever been done along these lines is a Harvard study done for over 70 years, where they've tracked men from all different social statuses with different paths in lives. They've had different amounts of success. They've had different types of health throughout their lives. And you know what they found? That's one thing. It's just this, that relationships are the only thing that are an indicator of whether you will have a long, happy life. So if you want to pursue joy, you have to pursue relationships. You have to invest in them and tend to them. In fact, when Paul is writing in Philippians chapter 2 about joy and about interacting with each other, about pouring yourself out, he writes to them about investing in relationship and how they should interact with one another. So joy, you can grow in it. My hope is that you'll take a little time this week and begin to think through some steps for you, how you might step forward, not directly pursuing happiness, but indirectly growing in joy by pursuing meaning, by practicing generosity, by investing in your relationships.